Yo, what up, a-holes? Thank you for tuning into the Holistic A-Hole podcast. My name is Erik Levi, and I'm the Holistic A-Hole, the mommy blogger with balls, the inconvenient truth of health, and a certified nutritional therapy practitioner. How's it going, everybody? Hope you're doing great. I'm here in New York City, but for not very much longer. So the sounds that you're probably hearing in the background, sirens, I got the window open. I know it's probably not the best for acoustics, but, it's a beautiful, overcast, gloomy day here in New York. One of my last ones here in the city. Just a little life update for the a-holes who come back week after week. I am relocating Holistic A-Hole Central here out of New York City. It's a very interesting time in my life, and going to be relocating down to Puerto Rico. So that's happening. It's pretty random. I know there's definitely reasons for it, which I'm not going to get into in this podcast. But I think the next podcast I do will maybe be like a little homage to my time in New York, because I think it does obviously play a lot into this podcast, because I believe living in New York is what made this podcast possible for many different reasons, which I'll talk about on that podcast. Not to mention, I've been a part of this city for a long time now, and it is kind of like sentimental in a way of just kind of, closing a chapter in my life and moving on to something far more random and scary and interesting than if I would just continue living my life here in New York. So I'll talk about that on the next podcast. But for now, I'm here in A-Hole Studios, which is for the most part in boxes, and very soon a moving company will come and take these boxes away, just whisk everything away from me, and I got to put this all in a storage unit. So I might have to take a call here in the middle of the podcast to coordinate with these people coming. So I apologize beforehand if that's going to happen. But look, you guys tuned in here for Holistic A-Hole stuff, and that's what I got for you. And I'm going to get into a health topic here, but before I do, I just want to throw a little commentary out on something I've seen circulating through my personal social media. I don't know if you a-holes are in this world. I think some of you are, but it pertains to First Amendment free speech. Me, I'm a staunch defender of free speech. Everything I do in my life and have valued in my life, from the time I decided I was not going to go this traditional route of having a 9-to-5 job, and when I decided I'm going to pursue a life in the arts or the performing arts or just being an a-hole, is the importance of the First Amendment right in this country, protected under the Constitution, of free speech. And so there's a very popular podcast out there, one of my personal favorites, called the Legion of Skanks. And I know this doesn't have anything to do with health, but I'm going to get to a point here. This podcast is hilarious, and it was one of the first podcasts I started really listening to a lot, on top of, or I should say, in addition to actually going to the live podcasts, for like a year or two when they first started their 3 comics here in New York City, all hilarious, all very successful. And they have this podcast called Legion of Skanks, which prides itself on being the most offensive podcast online. And if you've spent any time listening to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about. It's pretty rancid, but it is, just full-on gut-busting, knee-slapping, tears rolling down your face, hilarious. The hardest I've ever laughed in my life here as an adult has been either listening to the Legion of Skanks or at one of the live recordings. Because it's just hilarious. And, look, there's so much just Tom J. fuckery in the world and shenanigans and people trying to keep you in a box and tell you what's allowed and what you're allowed to think and allowed to say and allowed to communicate, that, we need platforms that allow people to just be raw and unfiltered. Because it's amazing to me that in 2019, how that is becoming more and more rare. And people who want to shut you up, people who want to take away your ability to speak your mind, whether it's through, deplatforming, which of course has been, widely publicized amongst personally people that I look up to, and well, maybe not look up to, but listen to and watch, people who I follow. I've watched their accounts on YouTube and Facebook just disappear. I have a podcast from almost a year ago about Alex Jones and how I was personally just irritated and full on fucking ragefully pissed off that, there's this coordinated effort to take someone like Alex Jones off of all of them: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the podcasting platforms, Twitter, Pinterest. I don't know if Alex does Pinterest, but that'd be fantastic if you're looking for a, gluten-free muffin recipe and maybe some truth about what's going on in Syria and the Trump-Russia collusion scandal. You might go to Pinterest, right? It bothers me that they've taken Alex off. It also bothered me 2 years ago when all of these, right-wing leaning people were getting, accused of being Russian spies and agents. There was like a document that was printed in the New York Times and the Washington Post calling out like 200 right-wing, what would you call them? Like podcasters and YouTubers and content creators, calling them Russians. One dude I know specifically, the health ranger, Mike Adams, this guy's based in Texas. This guy could not be any more, conservative, American, red, white, and blue, bleeding red, white, and blue, and they're calling this guy a Russian agent. They're calling Alex Jones a Russian agent. I mean, it's just fucking ridiculous, right? How what they're trying to do is just put the censor and tell you you're not allowed to listen to these people over here because they're evil, because they're Russians, because they're not telling the truth or whatever the truth is to them. And you have to listen to all these people like the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the Mother Jones and the Huffington Post and the fucking BuzzFeed News and just all of this just propaganda garbage, right? So this has just been like a nonstop barrage, really, for several years now, to the point where it's just you have these social justice warriors on Twitter, on social media, who they what is it, dog whistle, and they ramp up their base and they get people fired up. So my point is with the Legion of Skanks podcast, this last week they had on a guest who is an outspoken right-wing, columnist or whatever you want to call him. He used to write for Breitbart, this guy Milo Yiannopoulos. And I've never really read the guy's stuff. All I know is what I hear from people who I'm going to disagree with on basically everything anyways. And I can't imagine the guy, as soon as you call somebody a Nazi, now my interest is piqued as, okay, what did this guy really write? Did he write about murdering and gassing Jews? Probably not. Probably not. As far as I know about this guy, he's gay, he's a conservative, he's married to a black guy, so, I think he's a little bit more progressive than people are assigning to him. But either way, there was this huge thing about deplatforming or not allowing Milo to be on the podcast, and there was this big uproar in the New York City comedy community about, safe spaces for people and boycotting the venue where they were going to do the podcast, which is a place that I've performed at many times, as a comic here in New York City, and is very friendly to comics. And all of these social justice warriors are now calling Antifa to come in and throw milkshakes at people. And it just makes me angry as a content creator, as a podcaster, as especially in the health and wellness space, as somebody who is sitting here and, as you a-holes know, challenging the traditional way of viewing health. Because let's just face it, America has a $1 trillion health catastrophe on its hands at the moment, and it's only getting worse. And it has everything to do with the tainted food supply, the chemicals in the air, the water, in the food, in vaccines, in overdosing people with substances that they may not need, Unnecessary money spent on surgeries that might not be necessary. And then on top of all that, the discussion of, well, why don't we just put that bill on the government to handle? And we as the citizens will just pay for that through our taxes, which of course would be a pretty monumental increase in 300 million people's fucking taxes, which half of the people don't want to pay. And if we're going to have the argument, if we're going to have the discussion, if we're going to have the debate about what is acceptable in medicine and in healthcare, then everything needs to be on the table. You should be allowed to say every single thing, at least factually, that has happened. And when you start taking away people's First Amendment rights, when you start putting limits on the things that people can say and talk about, if they're coming for conservative right-wing people talking about Trump and Russia and, abortion or whatever, what are they going to come at next? They're going to come at, well, you're not allowed to talk about you're not allowed to talk about vaccines, right? You're not allowed to talk about vaccines unless your opinion of vaccines is, well, they're flawless. They're perfect. They're everything we need in society. When, there's plenty of evidence that points to the fact that that's not necessarily true. Do we need vaccines? Of course we need vaccines. But should we be able to have the discussion that there might be something wrong with vaccines, that the idea and the execution of vaccines is inherently flawed? You better fucking believe your ass. You better fucking believe your ass that we need to have that conversation. And just because some, fucking person on Twitter who has 30,000 followers doesn't like it, and then he riles up a whole bunch of people and this thing goes viral, and now everybody's calling for, anti-vaxxers to be deplatformed, well, now we have a problem, right? Now we have a problem. And this is where I come in, because I like to talk about that shit. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a researcher. I'm a dude with a certificate in holistic health. Okay? And if I'm going to work with people and I need to talk to people about how to get their health back together, my job isn't to tell people, oh, well, go back to your doctor and see if he can prescribe you more medicine. What I need to tell people is, look, the medicine you're taking might not be working. And so here's some scientifically evidence-based, proven ways to actually heal yourself using food, using hydration, using herbs, using nutritional supplements, right? Without the fear of thinking that, well, if I say this and the wrong person hears it, now I'm going to get deplatformed. This is a serious problem. This is a serious problem. And let's not even forget the fact that, look, this is going to be very controversial, but we're dealing with, record numbers of not just autoimmune disease. We're dealing with fucking insane amounts of hormonal problems in this country. There's a hormone catastrophe in this country, right? I walk around New York City. I see a lot of, trans people, right? Is it any surprise that the rise in chemicals and additives in food most likely directly correlates with the increase in gender pronouns that we have in society? That people are identifying as all of these different genders that, I don't know, did they exist? Did these genders exist 10 years ago? I don't think so. I don't think they did. Am I wrong? I could be wrong. Am I saying anything hateful? No, not at all. What I'm saying is that we should be investigating the link between chemicals and people whose hormones are so out of whack that they don't even know what sex or gender they are. Even if you're a dude and you're looking at your wee-wee, you think you're a woman. You think sometimes you're a man, sometimes you're a woman, sometimes you're a kitty cat. That's a fucking problem in society. And let me take this one step further and highlight a personal adjacent experience. Me and the lovely Miss A-Hole, we went to a very popular spa here in New York City. I know, white privilege, what are you going to do? We went to a very popular spa here in New York City from a Groupon, let me say, before you start, fucking putting me in the corner of I'm not doing that well, okay? If I'm on Groupon getting spa coupons. Spa Groupons, okay? It's a very nice spa, though. And so we go, and there's a guy's changing room and a girl's changing room, and, in both these changing rooms, the prospective sex, you basically walk around naked in your locker room because you go, there's like hot tubs and saunas and, showers, and it's just like a really chill thing. You just go in and you just fucking sit there. I'll sit there and just butt naked fucking shave with, rusty ass one-time use razors. And I'll just sit there on the little whatever plastic thing. There's no way it's sanitary. I'm sure there's, all kinds of weird fucking, strep bacteria, fucking mononucleosis going in my asshole from weirdos that have sat on that motherfucker before me. But for the most part, it should be a safe space considering there's people just walking around naked. So Miss A-hole goes to the female changing room, and on her way out of the spa, she goes to the front counter and she complains because there's a dude in the female changing room. And so she tells the guy, the lady at the counter, and she's like, "Oh, well, he identifies as a woman." And they put this little sign at the front counter, something about like, according to New York law, this spa cannot discriminate based on sex or gender or some shit like that. Which basically means that if you walk up to the front counter and I'm a man and I'm all man and I got my tank top on, you can see my muscles because I got fucking muscles. You can see my nipples peeking out through my little fucking tank top. You can see my veins ripping through my arms. You can see my Adam's apple busting out my neck. And I go, "I'm actually a woman. My ID card says Erik, but it's actually Erica." And I just came up with this recently, but according to New York state law, if I say I'm a woman, well, I'm a woman. And that's what they have to honor. So sure as shit, there's a fucking dude hanging out in the women's locker room at this spa. And, I wasn't in there. It wasn't me. But because this dude identifies as a woman, he's just sitting in the spa where there's naked women walking around. Tell me that's not a fucking hazard. This discussion of like, should men and women bathrooms and, gender specific going into, different... No, fuck that, man. If you look at your privates and you have a penis, you're a man. You can dress up like a woman. You can be a drag queen. Whatever you want to do. I don't care. That's your life. I have nothing but love for whatever you decide, however you want to present yourself to the world, okay? But when we're talking biological truth, there is no more biological truth. No more than 2 + 2 = 4. 3 + 2 = 5. 5 - 1 = 4. You look at your penis, you are a man. You are 100% a man. Women, you look at your vagina, you are a woman. And if you have both, you're a hermaphrodite. That's it. That's what we have in the world. So if I, as a holistic a-hole, need to bring up the fact that, hey, this is not natural. This is not natural that people's hormones are so fucked up that they look at their penis and they don't know what the hell sex or gender they are. Well, we have a problem. And I'm going to guess that the problem has a lot to do with our food supply, with the amount of plastic in the running in basically the food supply, the water supply, the air supply, the amount of mold in buildings, chemicals. There's fucking a subset of chemicals called endocrine disruptors. Could there be any more of a smoking gun to the fact that you're going to have hormone problems due to chemicals that specifically alter the way that your endocrine system works? Endocrine disruptors? And so what you just heard me talk about for the last 5 minutes, some of you are like, "Yeah, Erik, that's a great point." And some of you are like, "That's fucking hate speech. You're a Nazi." Because I just laid out what is scientifically a truth. And scientifically disturbing to people who have to be subjected to your confusion, i.e., a man in a woman's changing room where women are paying for the ability to walk around naked in a safe environment in a spa. So when it comes to the First Amendment, I'm very just black and white. There is no gray. There is no room for debate. I don't care. You can have the most hate speech. You could be Hitler. You could go be Hitler. You could take out a little corner in a park somewhere. You could have a full-on Nazi rally, and you could fire people up, and you could say, "Kill 6 million more Jews." Unfortunately, as terrible as that is your right to say that. Now, I can protest you. That's fine. I can build my own little, following of people and go protest that non-violently. But you have the right to say that. And as disturbing as I feel your speech is, I'm not going to take that away from you. And to be honest, there aren't a lot of people in this country who believe the harsh example I just laid out. Most people are pretty chill, Most people, no matter what side you are, they're just looking out for their best self-interest. Liberals call Democrats Nazi, or liberals call a lot of conservative people Nazis. Why? Because they don't believe in free healthcare. I've laid out many episodes in this podcast where I tell you exactly why free healthcare is a terrible idea. Medicare for all is an awful idea. It's not because I want babies to die. It's not because I want genocide in the country and I want millions of people to... No, it's because it just is a fundamentally flawed system, and paying more money into it by taking more money out of people's hard-earned paychecks is not the way to fix the healthcare system in this country. It's that simple. Some people don't believe in abortion. They're not Nazis. They're people who believe in a child's right to fucking live. It's very simple, okay? So this harsh rhetoric we have, whatever side you're on, just stop it. Stop it. People will say what they want to say, and you should not be going in and butting your face in. It's a very simple thing. Growing up, my mom had a line that drove me crazy, but now as an adult, I can't believe I have to reference this. But if you don't like what you're watching, change the channel. Nobody's forcing you to watch or listen or read anything. Again, the beauty of living in a country like America, that millions of people, hundreds of thousands, tens of, I don't know the number, have died for. So buck up and stop being such a little bitch. That being said, let's get into the health stuff that I was going to talk about today. And what I want to mention is I saw this article circulating online. It was printed by The Guardian. And it's funny because I saw this about the same time I've been thinking about something kind of in the same realm. And so this article is called Banned Bread. Why does the U.S. allow additives that Europe says are unsafe? Oh, wow, funny. Funny, here in America, we allow, just companies to put all of these chemicals into food that, they think is good because it helps preserve the food longer. It helps make the food look more like the thing that you want it to look like, right? Like there's additives they put into bread that make it fluffier, that give it a certain color, that make it, rise when it's heated, that, just make it more bready bread-like. Also, that make it last longer on the shelf. I'm not a big bread guy, but years ago when I was, when I had bread just to make sandwiches, I remember I would get just the cheapest, middle of the grocery store white bread or wheat bread. And I would get it because I knew that shit lasted for weeks. Bread is not supposed to last for weeks. Bread should last you maybe several days, if that. Because keep in mind too, when you get a loaf of bread, that bread at that point is a couple weeks old. From the time it's grown to the time it's picked, to the time it's processed, to the time it's packaged, to the time it's driven to your grocery store, put on the shelf, and then the time it gets to you. I mean, there's been a couple weeks that bread has been alive, and now it's kind of on its last leg. So when you have a loaf of bread that lasts, more than a couple days, chances are it's filled with a lot of shit. It's filled with a lot of shit that we put here in the United States that other countries aren't putting in. The European Union, they don't allow these chemicals in their bread, right? And so I know this isn't like new news to a lot of you, but I'm bringing it up because we make so much of a big deal about gluten, and I'm guilty of this because this is what is in the mainstream, the mainstream, even holistic health community is like, well, we need to avoid gluten, we need to avoid gluten. And I've read a lot of stuff in the last year about gluten, about, how it does trigger autoimmunity. But I've always been a little unsure of it, and I'll tell you why. Because in Kate Shanahan's book, Deep Nutrition, she discusses gluten, okay? Let me take a step even further back. When I was a vegan, I was a staunch defender of gluten because I was eating so much of it, right? Because I was, the base of the diet is like a perverted version of the USDA food pyramid, which is your base is grains and starches, right? Could there be anything worse for you than grains and starches? Although, some potatoes, some sweet potatoes here and there, not terrible, right? Starchy vegetables, turnips, beets, what else is there? Squashes, those sorts of things. Yeah, that stuff's good for you, right? In moderation, a couple times a week, not bad, right? Every single day, yeah, you kind of want to avoid that. But, there was a lot of gluten in my diet, whether it was from bread or wraps or tortillas or, junk food, vegans, chips. There's a lot of gluten in the vegan diet. So, I found studies that supported gluten, much to the chagrin of the paleo community that I'm pretty much a part of now. Now I jumped in the paleo community, and it's like gluten is the root of all evil, And yeah, there's a lot of research that says something like Hashimoto's, thyroid disease, hypothyroid. The immune system is physically attacking the thyroid, especially upon consumption of gluten. So, there is a lot of correlation between people who, especially women, I'd say mostly women, who eat a lot of bread, a lot of starch, a lot of gluten, and their propensity towards Hashimoto's. Sorry, I'm drinking a 3-day-old iced coffee because that's how I roll. And so the thing about gluten is gluten actually has a very similar molecular structure as thyroid hormone, or thyroid. The protein gluten has a very similar molecular structure, as thyroid hormone. So the immune system recognizes gluten once it passes through the gut barrier and into the bloodstream, of course, as a foreign invader, which it's supposed to do. But then when you're not eating gluten, the immune system's just fucking charged up, right? The immune system's trained to kill, right? Natural killer cells. That's a real thing, right? Your lymphocytes, your whole lymphatic system, right, is like a gym for your immune system, just training, just getting fucking jacked, just doing kettlebell swings and power cleans and fucking taking the juice and just getting ready to fuck up any foreign invaders in your bloodstream. And so your immune system turns into like the bad cop, right? Who's just so jacked up on power and authority that, he'll fuck up a criminal, but then he'll fuck up somebody who's dressed like a criminal, right? So if he had to take down some dude who is wearing, a tight t-shirt and a sideways hat, and he's like, damn, every criminal looks like this motherfucker. And now every time he sees a person like that, he's going to take him down hard, send him to jail, teach him a lesson. That's what your immune system's doing to your thyroid, because your immune system's like, I fucked up that gluten. Oh shit, look at that thyroid hormone that looks just like gluten, but me, as a natural killer cell, I only know that shit as gluten. So your immune system just goes, bonkers on your thyroid. So this is the problem why, you have to not eat gluten. But it turns out that in a lot of respects, gluten is not the number one offender of your immune system, all right? Because again, here in America, we put in a lot of these chemicals to our bread and wheat products, okay, that they don't allow in other countries, for example, the European Union. So it's like this classic thing that I could not understand forever, which is the French paradox, right? People go to Europe, and I think the French paradox specifically is like, why can I drink wine and eat cheese and bread and not get fat? Right? Why are the French people still have low BMIs and, they have low levels of cancer? I don't know if that's particularly true, because I don't know if in the French paradox they factor into how much people in France smoke. But either way, they don't have the same health problems we have in here in America. Their health problems are probably more caused by cigarette smoke. Ours are just because we eat too much shit food. And so when you start kind of breaking down the differences, there's still gluten in their bread. And some people have said, well, it's because the gluten here is genetically modified, right? It's sprayed with pesticides. Okay, that's very true, right? But we also have chemicals in our bread, like I'm gonna really try hard to say this right, but god damn it, don't hold it against me. Azodicarbonamide, azodicarbonamide, ACA is what they call it, right? Which is what forms bubbles in foams and plastics like vinyl, and it's used to bleach and leaven dough. And when baked, it has been linked to cancer in lab animals. Okay, what about potassium bromate, which is an oxidizer that helps bread rise. What about yeast, dude? What about yeast, okay? Because yeast, unlike potassium bromate, has not been linked to kidney and thyroid cancers in rodents, okay, for as far as you can take like a rat study or whatever, right? The big thing that I've been that I've been interested in recently is iron. Because here in America, we figured out a long time ago that our kids are nutrient deficient. Our people are nutrient deficient, So what did the USDA do? Well, they said, well, I don't know the year this happened, but but at some point they said, well, let's start fortifying the foods with vitamins and minerals that people aren't getting through their normal diets. So what are they doing? Oh, well, they're putting B vitamins, they're putting folic acid, and they're putting iron into wheat products because they can just do that shit. Right? If they're going to put all of this stuff that you can make yoga mats and carburetors and fucking, IKEA curtains with, if we can put all that stuff in a wheat, why not just put iron? And so people see that, they're like, yeah, I need more iron. Everybody says that. You're like, oh, well, why am I tired? Well, you need more iron. Okay, maybe you do. Or maybe you don't. Because the iron they're actually putting in the wheat is not like, a bioavailable form of iron. They're not putting in the iron that occurs naturally in things like animal meat, This is like iron scraps. This is like if you went to a building that's being built out of steel and they were like, okay, we got all that steel in the building. Oh, look, we got some leftover steel. You know what we should do? Let's take one of those little, sharp, spinny razor doohickey things. You can tell I'm very, very handy dude here. And let's start just shredding off shards of iron and put that in bread. And that's what they're doing. They're putting iron scraps into bread. And again, that iron is not used in your body. When your body gets iron from food that includes iron, again, mostly, animal meat, and then maybe some random green leafy vegetables, I believe, have some iron in them. That's bioavailable. Your body knows what to do with that molecularly. When your body just gets, shards of iron, that goes in your body, and your body's like, I don't know what the hell to do with this. What does it do? Well, it stores it in places like your liver. It stores it in your muscles. It just floats around in your blood. And so people will, they'll go to their doctor and their doctor will say, oh, you got great ferritin, because your ferritin is the storage form of iron. Okay, great. I got high ferritin. That's awesome. Okay. But you have to understand that doesn't mean that the iron is being used by your body, right? This is the disconnect we have in healthcare, is we're not delineating the difference between bioavailable forms of nutrients and nutrients that just go into your body. This is why a lot of times blood testing can be very false positive. This is why any testing a lot of times can be very false positive, because you might have a nutrient in your blood that doesn't mean it's being used. For iron to be used successfully, you need things to make it work, right? You need copper. You need ceruloplasm, right? You need these other cofactors to make the iron work. And the way you tell if iron's working in your body is if you measure these other things and those aren't right. Then you see, oh shit, well, now I'm iron toxic. And iron toxicity has been linked to, a lot of different things. Atherosclerosis, diabetes, cancer, all the good ones, right? You have COPD, so, iron toxicity gets in your lungs, alcoholic and other forms of liver disease, gout, psoriasis, age-related macular degeneration, inflammatory bowel disease, asthma, lupus. So iron could be completely fucking you up. And what is a huge source of iron in this country? Well, let me see. Oh, bread. So, one of the problems with the holistic health community, again, is the fact that we've launched an all-out assault on gluten. And I think it's fair to do that. But also, we're just completely forgetting about this other stuff, which is why we have this multi-billion-dollar gluten-free industry, and yet many of the diseases that people have gotten that they've attested to gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance, those haven't gone away, right? And people are getting sick with these other things that I just mentioned, and they're like, oh, well, it must be the gluten. So you know what I'm going to do? Instead of eating a muffin, I'll eat a gluten-free muffin. What's in that gluten-free muffin? Oh, all the same shit that's in the gluten muffin except gluten. And you're not getting better. In fact, many of that stuff is filled with even more sugar, different flours that are not good, tapioca flour, fucking rice flour, all of these different flours, which there's still plenty of shenanigans with those flours. Oh, and they're also being, coated and baked with things like canola oil or cottonseed oil. So it's not like, hey, again, the gluten-free industry, they're not doing you any favors. They're making a lot of money. And believe me, I've been plenty guilty of falling for this racket of just being like, well, I'll go with the gluten-free bun for my burger instead of the bun. No, fuck that. Just go with the lettuce wrap. Just be that guy. I got to be that guy. It's embarrassing. I hate it. I feel totally emasculated every time I got to get a burger with like a lettuce wrap. Ugh. But it's really the only way to clear yourself from all these other additives that are being used to make industrial chemicals, or that are industrial chemicals being used to make materials that you find around your house, or something like iron itself that they just put into the bread. And it's funny because when you call these companies out, great example is when the Food Babe demonstrated to the people at Subway that one of the chemicals, I don't remember exactly what the chemical was, I think it was like carrageenan or something like that it's the same chemical they use in yoga mats, and she, made a viral video or an article or something that basically demonstrated that fact, that Subway was like, oh, well, we'll just take that chemical out of the bread. Why did you have it in the bread in the first place, Subway? Why, if the bread didn't need the yoga mat chemical, why was it there in the first place? And now you have the same thing going on with with some of these other companies here, like who is it? Pillsbury. Pillsbury, they have some products like their French breadsticks and sourdough breakfast bread and breadstick. They have like these chemicals, the ACA and the potassium bromate in them, and Pillsbury's like, look, we're just whatever the FDA wants us to do is what we'll do. Despite the fact that, there are all of these, scientific studies that say you shouldn't have that. They're like, well, we'll wait for the FDA to do it. And of course, the FDA, they're not going to stop. They got contracts with all the manufacturers of these supplies. You think DuPont's going to stop making whatever the fucking ingredient is that doesn't belong in food that they keep putting in food? I'll tell you who I do respect of this whole thing. Arby's. Because Arby's has this shit in everything. Everything. And they're like, no, we're Arby's. We're not taking that shit out. We're not taking that shit out. We're Arby's, man. Nobody comes to Arby's for health purposes. So leave us alone with our ACA and our potassium bromate. This is how we're going to roll, son. So, my point in all this is, look, if you're one of these, holistic a-holes and you're like, I've given up gluten, that's awesome. You absolutely should. At the same time, don't let the cover over your eyes too much and think that, well, you've given up gluten and now you're in the clear. No, because in these breads, in these wheat products is all this other harmful shit that you should also be avoiding. And if I were you, I would, as difficult as it is, read the article Iron Behaving Badly, which basically goes into detail of what iron toxicity is doing to the body in all of these different ways, which is amazing because they keep putting it in the food. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I know it's a little all over the place. If you did, please go on to iTunes, leave a 5-star review. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and go find me on the social mediums, Facebook, Instagram. Those are the two biggest ones. If you enjoyed the podcast, take a screenshot of the podcast playing in your phone, put it on your Instagram story, tag me, Holistic A-Hole, and I'll be sure to share it on my social media. If you like what you heard, if you want to work with me, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at ericlevinutrition@gmail.com or holisticahole@gmail.com. If this is your first time here, thanks for finding me. Take a few minutes or a few hours, take a little Holistic A-Hole binge, catch yourself up on what we've been doing here for the last few years, and listen up for the next one, because there's going to be another one, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.